Today we are going to be going over the first step of working on your printmaking project. So for this, you are going to need your printed off picture, like this, and your plexiglass with the film still on it. So there's a little film on both sides here. It helps protect the glass from any extra scratches, and you want to keep those on there. Okay, now this one is pretty see-through. If yours is not super see-through, come talk to me about that and we'll figure out what we should do for that. Okay, but what you're going to do is you're going to take your plexiglass and you're going to set it on top of your picture, and you want to kind of level it here. Make sure it's nice and centered, right? So if it makes sense to move your plexiglass closer to this edge of the paper, that's totally fine. I actually think I am going to move it just a little bit. Okay, then you are going to take some masking tape, just a small amount. This. So I have a piece here and I'm going to tear this into two pieces. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to press this on the top and the bottom of my paper here. And then I'm going to carefully wrap this around. So I'm going to go ahead and press this down here against the paper since mine overlaps. And then I will lift it up, flip it over here. Whoops. Flip it over here. And then I'm just going to kind of press this down here to help hold it in place. Okay, so it helps keep it in one spot. Okay, so I have this here. Then I'm going to start on the next step, which is the outlining part. Okay, so basically what I'm going to be using is some pen techniques that we practiced last semester, so those are going to come back into play. And I want to mainly focus on hatching and cross hatching, and also some contour hatching. Okay, so what I'm really doing is I'm looking at the shapes that I see here, the textures that I see, and I'm going to be drawing my contour lines in and shading to make sure that I'm following that and kind of honoring what's going on with my subject, right? So for my bird, a lot of this stuff kind of goes down and back this way, so my lines will follow that as well. Okay, so just as a reminder, when we have hatching, those are short lines like this. Okay, so short lines like that. You can add in more to make some areas a little bit darker. Right, you can have some areas that are a little bit lighter by spacing them out. Okay, you can also think about longer lines. You might have some shorter lines like that. Okay, you might also have some contour hatching, so that might be something like this, where it follows the shape. Okay, and then remember, cross hatching is kind of the same idea, except you have one direction here and then you come back this other direction. Okay, and that's usually if you kind of want to fill in like a solid area. Okay, it just really depends on what the subject of your picture is. Okay, so those are the main things that we're going to be using. We can't really use stippling or scumbling for this just because it's really hard to etch those textures into the plexiglass using the scratchers, right? And so we want to make sure that we have something where it's kind of a straighter line. Okay, so I'm going to be using things like this. I'm going to look back over here. Okay, and so I have my bird. Now, because of how this picture is with the bird and everything, this is a crow, and it has a pretty flat, solid line through here. Okay, so for this, I could go through and just start outlining it along the lines like this. Okay, so I'm just outlining directly onto the film that's on my plexiglass. Okay, now for some of the areas like over here for the feathers, I've kind of sketched those in like this. Right, and then I would add in some shading to it. Okay, so right here, this particular feather is a little bit darker than the one above it, and so I would add in a couple of lines here to show some shading. Okay, so anytime I have an area that looks a little bit darker, I will add in some shading by drawing those lines. Kind of like this here, right? So it have a few extra lines down here to show that this area here is darker compared to this area up here. Okay. I also have a little bit of a texture with the feather, so I could put in some of that there, just kind of lightly. Okay, and I don't want to show that it's too dark, so I spaced my lines out pretty far. Okay, I want to show you another example really quickly, because a lot of us will end up drawing an animal. And so I'm going to show you what that looks like so that you have more success with it. Okay, so I have a picture of this cat here, and I'm sorry that this is so shiny, but I wanted to show you the right and wrong way in order to outline this cat and to kind of put in those textures in there. Okay, so one of the things that people tend to do whenever they're working with animals that is incorrect, so this is definitely the way you don't want to go, is they will outline just like this. Okay, and I know I got a line that was pretty close to the actual outline, so it might be a little bit harder to see. Okay, but then they go back and then they start adding in a texture of fur. And it just does not look good. It's not a good time. That's bad news bears. Okay, what we want to do is on this side, okay, so we have the furry texture. So we don't want to draw a line first. We want to go in with just the little textures of the lines, like this. Okay, so we're not drawing a line and then adding the texture from there, okay, because it looks like weird tally marks. Okay, instead, I'm kind of going through here and I'm drawing in the little hairs like this. Okay, whenever you do this, it will look a lot better. It'll look a little bit more realistic. It will have just a way better end product. Okay, the other thing that I want to keep in mind too is while I'm working on this, there are some areas that I'm just going to draw in with a line. Okay, so for example, I would draw in this eye shape over here. Right, so that would look pretty round here like this, right? And then I would have the pupil, of course. Okay, and those would be pretty straight lines. Same thing with the little nose here. Kind of hard to pull that shadow there, huh? Right, so I would have these shapes in here like this, okay? But I wouldn't draw the outline of his little muzzle. I would instead go through and I would have those little lines going down like this. Okay, and I'm following the direction that those hairs are growing in, right? And so it's very important to make sure that you're looking at that as you're working through your shapes, okay? On the face, the hairs are a lot shorter, and so I'm going to use a lot shorter lines. Okay, and I'm going to think about how the hair grows using those little short lines through there. Okay. Like that. Okay, so I'm going to go through and I would just go through and add in those little lines. Something that you want to keep in mind, if you look here, this side of the cat is lighter, this side of the cat is darker. So I would have more lines on this side. I would have them closer together to make it look darker. Over here, I would use fewer lines. Okay, so for example, on this lighter area, I might have just a couple of textures kind of going out here, and I might make the areas where he has these little stripes in here a little closer together just so I can see that little texture. So whenever I look at the picture, I can say, oh, that's the tabby. Okay. So I go in and kind of focus on those darker areas first. Right, and then I might have a couple of spaced out little dashes in here. Okay, you can kind of see what looks best for that. Okay, I want to keep nice short lines though, because this cat doesn't have super long hair in general. Okay, in addition to the eye, I might also outline part of the ears, just because on this particular cat, the outer part of his ears are not super fluffy. Okay, I want to make sure that I'm keeping nice short lines here to show the texture correctly. Okay, what I don't want is hairs that go like this. Okay, that does not look good. Okay, I definitely don't want to have those in there. I want to keep those nice, small little textures. Okay, on his head here, his face, right? The little hairs actually come up this way. Right, and so we have this kind of little area here, it's a little bit darker. And then as they go around his face, they kind of curl out this way. Okay. And then for areas like the ears, right, he has these longer hairs in here, and so those would be longer, just because the actual hair itself is longer compared to his bodily hair. Okay, so you want to have the shorter hairs drawn in. Okay, if you have longer hairs, you can draw them to be that length, but do not try to fill in a lot of space with these long lines because they just look really weird. They don't look very cute. It doesn't look very realistic. And we just kind of want to follow the direction that the hair goes in. Okay, and so I'm just working on all of those dashes, and you would work through the whole thing like this. Okay, and I'm using a vis-a-vis on this one. This is not the type of marker that you would normally use, just because I wanted to be able to show you an extra one on this page protector. Okay, so looking back over here at my bird, sorry. Okay, I would go in with my Sharpie, and again, I am working on, kind of like the main outlines. With this one, there's not as much of a texture to it. There's a little bit of texture back here, and so I would draw a straight line here, and then I would kind of honor that texture by sketching in those little lines there. And again, it's a little bit harder to see for you. And I would also be careful about the background. Okay, so if I had a ton of trees in the background, I wouldn't draw every single tree. Okay, the most important thing I think for this bird here is that I draw in the branch that he is standing on, right? So I might have this line here drawn in like this. Okay, and I might kind of bring this off the page just a little bit. Okay, just to give us some kind of context, right, of where he is actually hanging out at. Okay, if you had something like this in yours where you had a branch, okay, you would also think about like what type of texture you would have here. Okay, so what I would probably do for this texture is if my lines on the bird are mostly going down this way, for this texture, I might follow the bark lines and go across this way, right? And I might put in just a few bits there to kind of show the darker areas. Right, I can use a little bit of contour hatching as needed. Right, so I might have a couple pieces throughout here to kind of help bring that in. Okay. And then of course I would draw in the rest of him here. Okay, so when you are finished with this, you would move on to the next video. After we talked about it, make sure you were on the right track, and you would work on your etching part. Okay, that's going to take a little bit more time than this part currently takes, because you really have to kind of carve into your plexiglass, but we'll go over those steps together in the next video.